everybody's favorite 80-something-year-old billionaire investor, Warren Buffett, just came out with his latest annual letter. I know when I was a teenager and first getting exposed to investing, this was like, I don't know, it's kind of like Christmas for long-term investors or something.
He's like the uncle that you want to have advice from. You know what I mean?
Right. As opposed to the uncle that you
the one that you avoid at Christmas parties and Thanksgiving.
So not a huge portion of his comments in the letter and everything. He did have a few interesting thoughts on electric utilities. And Berkshire Hathaway Energy is obviously a big part of his operations. In fact, I think he says it's the second biggest part outside of insurance. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. But he said, I actually wanted to get your thoughts first on this. In its electric utility business, our Berkshire Hathaway Energy operates within a changing economic model. Historically, the survival of a local electric company did not depend on its efficiency. In fact, a sloppy operation could do just fine financially, and the reason being, basically the local government guaranteed them a certain return on investment. That is changing, and he goes on to note that today society has decided that federally subsidized wind and solar generation is in our country's long-term interest. He goes on to talk about federal tax credits, the investments that they're making to take advantage of these. Did you guys have any particular thoughts on what might be useful for our foolish listeners, given Buffett's insights?
I mean, it just shows the advantages of running a utility like a business rather than like a company that's guaranteed income.
Right.
All of his utilities that he's picked up and transmission assets that he's picked up have become more profitable, safer, reduced headcounts. So it's showing that if utilities do want to get serious about their profitability and the business metrics that investors can focus on, you can change the game. And then with renewables, I mean, they own an astounding amount of wind.
They're the largest.
I think 6x the second competitor in terms of wind and solar power generation. 7% of the U.S. is wind, and 6% of the U.S. is solar electricity generation. Comes from some Berkshire Hathaway holding, which is pretty impressive and I think a little bit under the radar for most people. When you think about Berkshire, you think of the railways, you think about some of the oil services companies that he owns in terms of equipment that they provide, and then obviously the insurance businesses. But to be that big of a player in renewable energy, kind of under the radar, is a big surprise.
And with the amount that he's actually still plowing into it today,
billions,
it's billions of dollars, maybe not annually, but pretty darn close to that. And when you look at those investments, obviously with those federal tax credits, we don't know how much longer they're going to last. I mean, there's some plans, at least with like residential and things like that, where we're going to push it out for another 5 to 6 years. So we could see certainly Buffett making large investments over the next 4 or 5 years because it is such a lucrative investment with tax credits, with all the other
it's kind of a sure thing,
right? And with the amount of cash that Berkshire Hathaway is generating today, it's a pretty lucrative investment. In an interview that he actually did following up the shareholder letter, they kind of got into the argument that they've been having lately because one of his utilities, NV Energy, which is part of that utility group, is in a bit of a spat with
this is in Nevada.
Nevada, with Solar City and other residentials, basically on the premise of net metering and who gets to sell back and forth. And you can kind of go both ways with it. From the individual standpoint, it's like, well, I have to buy energy at 10.8 cents per kilowatt hour. Why can't I sell it back at the exact same price? And then on the utility side, it says, well, why do we have to buy energy back at the utility price when we have to transmit it? We have to, basically upkeep everything when we basically get zero profit on anything that happens there. So, I haven't quite found my final verdict on this yet. I mean, being both a Berkshire Hathaway and a Solar City investor, I'm kind of have conflicting interests.
You've got the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder,
so,
and you're just like,
they both make very valid points, and it's certainly something I'm going to be digging into over the next several months, trying to figure out how to wrap my head around it.
Taylor, before we move on here, I did want to get your thoughts. Berkshire Hathaway's energies, the energy segment, its earnings weren't up a lot. In 2014, it generated just under $2.1 billion in net earnings. And this past year, they generated 2370, so just over a $270 million increase. But 170 of it came from a Canadian transmission utility that they bought in late 2014, so not much of an increase. So one, why aren't their earnings going up much? And two, what the heck is this Canadian transmission utility?
Basically, it's Altalink is the name of the company that they purchased. It still remains under that name. Big player in Alberta, and they've been completing some transmission lines to bring wind energy to greater areas of Canada. So you're seeing that renewable energy portfolio carry over to this company as well. Several $1 billion in assets, looks like almost $6 billion at the end of 2013, and Berkshire paid almost $3 billion for it. So a little bit of a discount to what their assets were worth back then. But you're looking at this company continuing to grow, pour money back into the business, and it's transmission, and they're not generating anything. So it's just moving power from area to area. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them get into the power generation game given their assets.